welcome everyone. We're going to talk today about managing difficult behavior at home. For us here in the States, coronavirus shutdown has us all in our homes much more than we were 2 months ago. And we're all seeing, some positives coming out of this, connection. We're seeing our friends with autism communicate more as the stress of being out of the home is decreased. But we're also seeing spikes in challenges due to breaks in routine, everything being messed up, having to wear a mask, having to understand why school's been canceled. All of these things are presenting challenges. So our goal today is to really talk about some behavior basics and some other things that you can do at home to really structure the environment in a way where you can have the most success possible. You have cricket players and you have soccer players and you have teachers, and all of us, we have to go back to the basics sometimes, because that's where, when things get really tough, you have to remember your training and go back to the basics. And today is going to be us kind of talking through how to get back to the basics to do those things that really will help behavior at home. So again, thanks for joining us. We have a good session ahead of us, and we look forward to questions at the end. And I will turn it over to Dr. Bailey, who will run kind of the first half of the PPT, and then I'll see you and talk to you in just a little while. Dr. Bailey, take it away.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for calling in this evening. Dr. Nelson and I are thrilled to have this opportunity to speak with you and to discuss managing difficult behaviors at home. So what I'd like to do first is discuss some learner outcomes, kind of to give you just a heads up of what we're going to discuss this evening. So first, we're going to talk about the function behind challenging behaviors at home. And I hope that one of the things that you garner from this webinar is that behavior is a form of communication. Sometimes it's not, the communication that we would like to have, but it is communicating a need or a want for the individual. We're going to discuss some techniques for fostering pandemic understanding and communication for children with autism spectrum disorder or other developmental delays. We're going to discuss coping and calming skills for children. We're going to discuss becoming proficient using visual schedules to maintain daily routines, alternatives for maintaining interpersonal connections while social distancing. So, and then finally, obtain information for additional online resources to support positive behaviors at home. So a few considerations as we're going through this. Hold on, let me check. I've got a chat here. Just 1 second. Okay. Okay, I'm glad you can hear me. Okay. So a few considerations. We will take questions at the end, but please remember to protect and keep confidential the names and identities of attendees and their family members. You're more than welcome to share personal experiences or questions, or simply listen, depending on your comfort level. But we just ask that you respect that other parents and caregivers make their own decisions about their own personal experiences, particularly in the middle of a pandemic. But this discussion ultimately is a safe place to share feelings and to obtain and provide support, information, reassurance, and encouragement. We want this to be a positive, welcoming experience for everyone. So thank you so much again for your interest, and we will go ahead first with, just a second, understanding challenging behaviors. So as I mentioned previously, behavior is ultimately a form of communication. And when a child misbehaves or engages in a challenging behavior, they're ultimately communicating a need. A lot of times, particularly for children with autism spectrum disorder or speech delays, developmental delays, challenging behavior occurs because they don't have the skills to communicate their wants or needs. If we give them a better way to express that, they will no longer need to engage in that behavior. So for example, if a child is physically escaping from an activity, or for example, if they're engaging in homework and they get up and walk away, you might teach the student to sign that they're finished or need a break. And although we want a quick fix, of course, we have to gather information to reduce a challenging behavior. So I'll talk a little bit about that next. So all behavior serves a function. One potential function is first to access or get something. For example, a child consistently cries when his mother is on the phone to access her attention. I personally have a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old, and I can attest to this with Zoom calls. My children always have something that they need to do on a Zoom to access my attention because they want that attention to be engaged. Or secondly, it can be to avoid or delay something. So a child might throw his or her book to avoid doing their mathematics assignment. So taking things a bit further about the functions of behavior, accessing and avoiding, a child might want to access or avoid sensory information. Let me check real quick. Okay, great. So a child might want to access or avoid sensory input. And this is particularly true for children with autism spectrum disorder who might have heightened sensory reactions. So, for example, a child might want to access the feeling of swinging or of climbing or those types of behaviors. On the flip side, they might want to avoid extremely loud or shrill noises, extremely bright lights, things like that. In terms of attention, children might want to access positive attention, so having that encouragement from parents and caregivers or peers, and they might want to avoid negative attention, feeling left out, for example, here. And then in terms of tangibles means something that you can feel or an activity you can engage in. They might want to access computer time, iPad time, and they might want to avoid tasks that are viewed as arduous or unpleasant, such as the little girl in this picture is washing dishes. So these are just some examples, but they really vary on a case-by-case basis by child. So what might be something that one child wants to access might be what another wants to avoid. But children might engage in these types of behaviors to attain that input or to avoid it. Just a second. Okay. So in terms of understanding behavior, we talk about the ABCs of behavior. So antecedents, behavior, and consequences. So I'm going to start from the middle where it says behavior. The behavior is anything we can see a person or a child doing. And behavior can be positive or negative. From a challenging behavior standpoint, there could be screaming, flapping hands, physically aggressive behaviors, defiance. Then to go back to the A, antecedents are essentially what happens right before the behavior occurs or the trigger for the behavior. So some potential antecedents or triggers for a behavior might be being prompted to complete a task, sensory overload, so just feeling overwhelmed, loud noises, bright lights, for example, or transitioning from a favorite activity. So, for example, if a child's doing something that they really enjoy doing, such as playing a game or iPad time, and then you say, oh, it's time to put the iPad away, that can be a trigger for a challenging behavior. So then finally, consequences. The C is the events or conditions that are present right after a behavior occurs. So after the behavior occurs, we want to look at, did the behavior serve its purpose for the child? So for example, if the individual is taken to a quiet room, the teacher or parent raises their voice, or the individual gains additional time on a preferred task. So to give you a bit of an example, let's say that your child is engaging in a game that they really enjoy, and the antecedent is you say, it's time to put the game away. The behavior is the child starts screaming and says, no, I don't want to put it away. If the consequence is that the child is able to continue playing the game, that behavior is what we call reinforced. So the child's behavior serves a purpose and they learn that that behavior works for them. So they're more likely to engage in that behavior in the future. If the consequence is even still, they're unable to continue the game and you follow through with it, they're less likely to continue the behavior. So taking that into account, when we want to look at changing our child's behavior, even though we always want a quick fix, we have to look at more of a proactive than a reactive approach. So changing their behavior starts by changing ours. This includes how we organize and structure the routines, and Dr. Nelson's going to talk a bit more about the importance of routines and predictability, particularly in the middle of stay-at-home orders for a lot of us. How to create and support their environment. So even though sometimes children like to impose their own structure on situations, ultimately they look to us for guidance and predictability, and having that sense of structure and knowing what comes next is really comforting to children, and in turn reduces challenging behavior. And then finally, how we respond to behavior. So if we reinforce the behavior so it's more likely to occur, or if we don't, so that we can teach more positive behaviors. So we also want to teach new skills. When we talk about challenging behavior, communicating a need is ultimately because the child doesn't have the skills to respond, or even the self-regulation to respond in a positive way. So functional communication, improve sensory strategies, so helping the child to better manage those negative feelings or feelings of frustration, and then improved ability to cope with frustration and disappointment. In the coming sections, we're going to discuss more preventative techniques to foster communication, positive routines, and calming strategies for children. So in this next section, I'm going to talk about fostering understanding and communication. And this is particularly from the standpoint of COVID-19 and being in the middle of a pandemic, which can be really confusing for a lot of children, particularly for those with language delays and things like that. So, understanding the pandemic. All children, especially those with developmental delays and autism spectrum disorder, might have varied levels of understanding about the COVID-19 virus and social distancing to reduce exposure. A lot of this is difficult and confusing for ourselves as adults to process, so particularly for our children, how we phrase that and really serve as a comfort and reassurance to them is imperative. So most importantly, and this is one of the take-home messages I would love when you log off of this to understand, is the most important thing right now is to make children feel secure. I know that we all have anxiety and we all are fearful right now, but children are very susceptible to the anxiety surrounding COVID-19, including those with autism spectrum disorder and developmental delays. You might not understand, but they probably pick up on more of the things that you realize. So you want to use concrete language, so to be direct, but reassure them that this is temporary and they are safe. So some tools to foster understanding that we're going to talk about further are social narratives, visual supports, and also visual cues to clarify the passage of time. I know that just personally, it's really hard sometimes to know, for example, what day it is and things like that when we're in a stay-at-home order. So particularly for children, being able to clarify the passage of time is really important to them. So here is an example social narrative for COVID-19, and I would encourage you after the webinar, if you'd like to email us, we have additional example social narratives based on age level and whatnot that might be helpful to you. So this is from University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill Child Development Institute. Hold on, I got a chat here. Just 1 second. Okay, perfect. Yes, we will absolutely share. So this example social narrative. Right now, lots of people are getting sick with the virus. Doctors and leaders are working hard to keep everyone healthy. I need to keep myself safe and healthy too. School is closed so students and teachers can stay healthy. While school is closed, it's important for everyone to stay home and not visit other people. While I'm at home, I can play, look at books, and learn. I also need to wash my hands a lot with soap and water. This will help keep me and my family healthy. Here's another one about greeting people. Because sometimes children don't quite understand that with social distancing and maintaining a 6-foot distance, it can be very confusing to them. So when I meet people, I like to shake their hand. When I see people that I know, I like to hug them. Some people do not like to touch when they greet others. They may feel sick and do not want to share germs. They might not be comfortable with touching others. When I greet people, I should ask if they're okay with shaking hands or hugging. If they say no, I can wave and just say hi. Asking before shaking hands or hugging will make everyone feel more comfortable. All right. So, in terms of communication challenges for children with autism spectrum disorder, one of the, I guess, hallmarks of ASD is difficulties with various forms of communication. So, communication is more than just verbalization. So, what we typically think about communication is expressive communication. So, that's using verbal words. But this also includes nonverbal skills. So, eye contact, gestures, making facial expressions directed towards an individual. Sometimes eye contact for children with ASD can be very fleeting, where they might not engage in eye contact, or it can be extremely intense. Sometimes children or even adults with autism might, for example, learn what we call camouflaging. So they might look at an individual's ears or watch their mouth to look as if they're engaging in eye contact, but it comes unnaturally to them. Theory of mind is really understanding that other individuals have their own different thoughts, feelings, things like that. So some things that are encompassed the theory of mind are empathy, perspective taking. An example of this might be just because a child likes pepperoni pizza, they might think that everyone else likes that. But understanding that other people have different preferences is theory of mind. And then finally, social communication. So for example, understanding humor. Sometimes individuals with autism spectrum disorder can take things very literally and not understand the nuances of humor. But as a result of these deficits or difficulties with communication, individuals with ASD might have difficulty communicating when they're frustrated. And in turn, anxiety, feelings of fear, nervousness, and frustration might manifest as difficult behaviors, including tantrums, refusal, or withdrawal. So one thing that you can do to prevent challenging behaviors is to provide opportunities for positive expression. And this is kind of it's dually positive because over time it can help the individual learn to express themselves in positive ways. So you want to do this at their developmental level, just recognizing that children at various ages have different skills with expression and based on their communication level. So some examples might be first writing activities. Journaling is one if they have the means to do so, or even drawing pictures if they're not able to write yet. Pen pal letters. I know both of my own son's classmates have been exchanging pen pal letters via mail, and it's just been wonderful to be able to communicate and receive letters in the mail. It's been really exciting for them. So that's one way that they can write and get their thoughts down on paper. Family and individual discussions. So for example, if you have a sit-down family dinner, again, using my own family as an example here, one thing that we like to do when we sit down for dinner is we talk about, we go around the table, talk about the best part of our day, the funniest part of our day, and something about our day that was not so good. And it really fosters that discussion about, what went right, what, may have been challenging for the child. And my hope is that as my children get older and become teenagers, it'll help with communication. So that's one way to just foster those discussions. Augmentative communication. So that includes the iPad, PECs, things like that for children who might not have the verbal capabilities to express themselves, but they can express themselves in an alternative means. Some children really love listening to music or playing music. Artwork is a wonderful opportunity for expression, so that can include drawing, painting, crafting, anything like that, pottery. And then finally, monologuing or role-playing, yoga, and dancing. There's a lot of videos on YouTube that are age-appropriate dancing, or what we call Zumba for children, that can be a wonderful opportunity for expression and to get those feelings of positivity. So. All right, coping and calming strategies. So if calming strategies are not yet part of your child's routine, with the stay-at-home order, this time of uncertainty is really an ideal time for teaching these skills. I know that a lot of you likely have some forms of calming strategies already for your child, but you can always create new ones as well. So examples might include sensory activities. So, and this kind of overlaps with what I talked about earlier. So rocking, swinging, engaging in artwork, listening to music on headphones, Deep breathing exercises. So one of my favorite deep breathing exercises or a calming strategy is to go through the various muscles. So for example, if you clench your fists for 5 seconds and then unclench them, and then clench your arms for 5 seconds and unclench them, and just go through all the various muscles of the body, it can be really calming, even for us adults as well. Watching preferred movies or videos. And then physical activity is really a wonderful calming strategy, including for us adults. And I'm going to talk more about this in a moment, but walking, online videos, dancing, yoga. So here's an example calming routine. And this is a visual that you can use with your child to kind of guide them through it. So first, take 4 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then number 2, clench your fist 4 times. Number 3, count to 10, and then at the end, you say, good job, you went through it. So this can be a really great reset calming routine. In terms of physical activity, we know that for all individuals, including children with autism spectrum disorder, that individuals who engage in regular physical activity, and that can be, it can manifest in a lot of ways. It can be simply walking or dancing, playing outside, basketball, soccer, things like that. But individuals who have physical activity have higher levels of self-esteem, so they think better of themselves. It reduces stress, and it makes sense. In turn, it decreases the risk of anxiety and depression. Physical activity improves our sleep, and overall, it increases quality of life, including for children. So it's so important to stay active right now, particularly for children. So I want to talk a little bit, and I won't delve into this too deeply, but just kind of the science behind why physical activity is so important for anyone, including adults. So when you engage in exercise, it releases positive neurotransmitters. So serotonin is one neurotransmitter that's related to various mental disorders, to depression, aggression, obsessive compulsive disorder, and anxiety. So interestingly enough, for individuals who have depression, anxiety, and other internalizing disorders, SSRIs, so they're called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So examples are Prozac, Wellbutrin, Zoloft, have serotonin in them. But exercise is a natural releaser of serotonin. So it's kind of like a natural pharmaceutical intervention. So physical activity increases serotonin levels in your brain, including in our child's brains. And in turn, this can boost emotional regulation, well-being, appetite, and sleep cycle, which are often negatively affected by depression. In a meta-analysis, so a meta-analysis is essentially where they look at 16 different, in this case, they looked at 16 different studies and combined all of the results. Sawa and Muhlenbroek reported physical activity interventions led to an average of 37% improvement in overall behavioral symptoms of autism spectrum disorder. So the children engaged in vigorous intensity exercises such as running, roller skating, swimming, exergaming. So exergaming is, for example, like on a Nintendo Switch or something like that, where the child exercises while using video games. They reduce the frequency of stereotypical behaviors, so self-stimulatory type behaviors, complex hand and finger movements, for example, aggression, self-injury, and hyperactivity. So, and for 37%, with exercise being free, you really can't beat it for your children. It can really help with challenging behaviors and preventing those unwanted outcomes. But with all of this said, I really wanted to, and this can be a separate webinar in itself, I wanted to touch on self-care for parents, especially in the middle of a pandemic. I know that we're all feeling stretched thin and might have various levels of fatigue and frustration. So really what I want to say is just take care of yourself as well. A lot of us are focused on our children, but it's so important to make sure that you are healthy as well, including mentally healthy. So development of self-care techniques is associated with lower stress level for parents and caregivers of individuals with autism. Some potential positive coping strategies include seeking information about autism in your child, So really reaching out and understanding the reason behind behaviors, and being a part of this webinar is one way of doing that. And I know that Madhvi has had a series of webinars, so I'm so glad that you're seeking that information, and hopefully that will give you some understanding in understanding your child's behaviors. Meditation can be one way, watching a favorite show, enjoying a snack alone, having some ice cream or your favorite snack after your children go to bed, exercise, even just taking an extra long shower or taking some time to yourself. Talking with others, such as a trusted friend, a family member, or a support group, reaching out to other parents. Even with social distancing, it's still so important to maintain those social supports, even if it's virtually. So spouses, extended family and friends, online communities. And then particularly as things open back up again in India, utilizing community support, such as recreation activities and education programs. Just a second, let me check this chat. Oh, okay, yes. Social narratives are also called social stories. Yeah, exactly, they're the same thing. It's just a different wording. All right, now I am going to switch it over to Dr. Nelson. He's going to discuss visual supports for daily routines now.
Beautiful. Thank you, Dr. Bailey, and that was great. Yeah, good work. We're going to dive into some basics you can do at home, try to give you some strategies and actual links and tangible things that you can leave this webinar and go try. How many of you, and this is rhetorical because you can't respond, we're online in a Zoom call, but we all use visual supports at home. And how many of you are using a visual support at home right now? I guarantee you it's near 100%. On my door right now, you probably can't read this, but this says, "Shh, Dad is on a call with 200 people." And I have that taped to the outside of that door as a visual cue for my little ones who are 13, 12, and 6, who are going to come crashing in that door. "Good morning, Dad." And I have to have a visual support there to remind them. Visuals are a huge key to the home environment. And we've been doing this for decades of work, and we still come back to the fact that your home environment needs to be visually structured in a way to help your son or daughter, student, friend, neighbor organize the chaos. Because for a person with autism, the world can be very chaotic, as we know. There's all this information coming in through the senses. There's demands being imposed by others. There's changes that happen. There are unexpected things that come into the day that can really upset a person. And then there's the difficulty of communication. And so we're going to start by talking just about some visual supports and why we use them. And Dr. Bailey, if you want to advance to the next one for me. Good. I'm starting to see somebody that said they started using PECs and visuals at home. That is fantastic. Good work. Okay, so really the first step you want to master is thinking about a schedule. Now, there are so many ways that every one of us human beings, schedules our day. Some of us use an iPhone or an Android with reminders in them. Some people are like me, where I write everything on paper. I'm an old-fashioned, jot it down and make a checklist kind of person. Very low tech, but also a little risky because a child can come in and take it and draw a doodle on it and throw it away and it's gone. We in our house, because we have 3 kids and busy parents, we use a weekly planner that's stuck to the wall. I even use stickers with my youngest, who is kind of struggling right now as she gets a little older with brushing teeth and doing some of those things as reinforcement. So Dr. Bailey talked about how we reinforce our kids, and schedules and visual supports can be great for introducing structure and ways for us to provide reinforcement, so that if my daughter tonight brushes her teeth without me saying, "Go brush your teeth," she can get that sticker of reinforcement and then go to the store later. Yes, I hope that we have in our slides today, and I think KidSense and Ananya and Madhvi will think of a way to get this stuff out to you, because there are several links in there and visual examples. So yes, somebody just asked in the chat if some of these things can be shared, and absolutely, we'll work to get whatever you need out there. So the benefits of a schedule. People with autism, all of us, but for sure people with autism, struggle to understand timing, sequence, and routine. Most of us, like in my head this morning, Madhvi and I and Nirmal and Catherine were on the call and we're figuring out Zoom. Meanwhile, I have emails coming in. I hear my dog needs to be taken outside. I know my coffee has finished in the microwave. And my brain can sort all of that stuff into a plan. I can think, okay, coffee first, then the dog, then back to Zoom. And my brain does a nice job of creating that list for myself. But our friends with autism struggle with that. So as soon as something is introduced or something new happens or novel, that prediction and sequencing can get completely thrown off. So what a schedule can do is anchor a lot of those variables into a visual representation. And a visual schedule helps them predict what's coming next and helps them develop flexibility when changes have to happen. So if you're not currently using something with your son or daughter or students, this is a step 101 place to begin is think about, okay, what information do we need to be posting that will help my son or daughter or student calm down, regulate, be able to predict what's coming next? And think about that is that they really struggle with getting ready for lunchtime. They have a hard time getting off of the iPad. They don't do well when it's time for me to say time for bed. All of those things are going to factor into what you build into your schedule. It's going to provide structure that your son or daughter's own neurology cannot produce naturally. They're in a constant state of flux thinking, what is happening next? And the schedule is going to provide that structure for them. And it's going to increase their independence because eventually, with a visual schedule, they're going to be able to see what's coming next, and you won't have to be there prompting every step of their day. Now that's a gradual thing, and I'll show you some examples where we start really small sometimes and really basic. But eventually your child is going to grow in independence where they don't need you constantly saying, oh, it's time now to go wash up. It's time for idli and dosa. It's time for your morning sambar. Can you tell that I miss Indian food? Yes. So a schedule is going to increase their independence too. And you can build your goals and tasks that you're working on with your son or daughter or student right into the schedule. So it's a good reminder for us too. It keeps us on track as caregivers, parents, and teachers. And of course, VADA. I miss VADA very much. All right. Next slide, please. So here's what you have to be thinking about when you're considering how to set up a visual. You have to think about, where am I going to present this? Too often we see teachers or parents just stick something up on the wall and then sit back and go, well, they don't use it. It's junk. Visual supports don't work. You really have to think about how you're going to teach them how to interact with it. Are you going to use pictures? Will you use objects? Is your son or daughter or student able to just read the sight words rather than pictures? Do they need both? Will the schedule be presented laterally? So will it be left to right? Will they work top to bottom? How visually do they need to have the schedule set up? All of that stuff are things that you can kind of consider. And don't worry, if you're sitting there going, well, I don't know if my son or daughter needs it left or right or up and down. Take it easy on yourself. Experiment a little bit. Play. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Don't be afraid to try things. And if it falls flat on its face, we say, that didn't work, but let me try what's next. Then you have to think, okay, how are we going to use this visual support? It's not good enough just for me to stick this up on the wall unless I teach my daughter how we're going to use it with stickers. And I have to coach her over and over. And if I catch her doing something really positive, I say, oh, great time to go put a sticker on your calendar. That was a really nice job listening to Dad. You have to figure out, okay, how am I as the caregiver or teacher going to use this support? What's my role in teaching this? How are you going to organize it? Are you going to have a little picture pocket somewhere? Is this something really, really simple that I just keep pictures in a little envelope? Do I keep all the pictures in my pocket? How do I organize all this stuff so I stay on top of it? Is it going to be available all the time? Some kids I know have just a mobile app that they have on either their iPod Touch or their Android or their iPad that just periodically pops up with reminders, or that they can hit a schedule button and it pops up their schedule. Trick with a visual schedule in the home is that oftentimes we stick it to the wall And as soon as we leave to go somewhere, we go to the corner tea shop or we go to Temple, we don't have that visual support anymore. So we're going to talk about that. Do we need to create an on-the-go schedule as well? We'll talk about that in just a few minutes. Next is, can a person's interests be incorporated into the design of the visual? This is where you can start to have a lot of fun and make the visual support really tailored to your son or daughter. Do they love cricket? Do they love Prime Minister Modi? Do they love, whoever the latest Carnatic singer is? Can we build that interest? Do they love Dora the Explorer or SpongeBob or some cartoon character? How do we take that interest and build it into the schedule? Now, don't worry, too, if some of those interests seem a little different to us. I've had kids that they love trash collecting machines. They love the garbage truck that comes along. So what we did was build a visual picture that had the garbage truck and little schedule things that would go into the back of the garbage truck. If they love fans, if they love air conditioning units, don't be afraid to build that into their schedule. That can really motivate them. It makes them go, ooh, I like to go check that. So yeah, don't be afraid to incorporate those interests. In fact, we really encourage you to do that. Okay, next slide, please. Now, if you're thinking, wow, my son or daughter or student cannot handle a full day schedule on a wall. It would overwhelm them. It would really push them too far. They wouldn't be able to process all of that information. The very first step you can take is to create a first-then visual. There are some examples in the slides. These can be so basic. It's literally, and I've just grabbed a pencil. If you make a quadrant, you have first and then. All you have to do there is whatever task is next, teeth brushing, getting ready for bed, getting ready to go to Temple, whatever that might be. And then the then is the reinforcer that comes right after that's been completed. So you're remembering Dr. Bailey's antecedent, behavior, and consequence. The consequence is the then. It's what comes right after they've completed that task. So we use first thens all the time, especially for those folks that can't process a full day or even a half a day. We say, all right, all you have to do is this first, then you get this. And then you just switch that up as soon as they're done. And what that teaches them is, there's predictability in the moment. I know what I have to do right now. And I also know that this person is going to help me access something I really like as soon as I'm done. And the more trust and the more repetition we build with the first then, the sooner we can start to build that out into maybe an hour or a half a day schedule. So starting with the first then is really great. They do not have to be complicated. I guarantee you folks at Ananya can help show examples of those. Keep it simple. I once had a family who just used a piece of cardboard. I mean, it does not have to be expensive, purchased out of a catalog. Make it work for you. It shows what's expected of the person. That's the biggest thing. I think our friends with autism who are processing all of this language and sensory information oftentimes are just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing next. I'm overwhelmed. Therefore, I'm just going to kind of stop. And so once expectations are conveyed, that's really helpful. Provides motivation because they see what's coming next and say, oh yeah, I really want that squishy toy. Of course, I'm going to work on my math for a little bit. That sounds great. And it helps them stay focused. All right, next slide, please. So one of the big things we tend to do, though, is once we get a visual schedule in place, we tend to impose all of this work. It's like, okay, go, work, finish that, next task, go, go, go. What we know about all of us, but especially our sons and daughters and friends with autism, is that downtime is clutch. And so is having choice. All of us like to have choice. Think about it. If we went to the local restaurant and we were only offered non-veg, that would upset a lot of us. We like having choice in our life, and our friends with autism are no different. So what you can do is create a separate visual or build it right into your schedule of a choice board, which means you've been working so hard. It's time for some relaxation. What do you want to do? And they can go to a choice board, and what you've done is preset a whole bunch of options for them, and it helps them take that chaos and focus it onto this particular example has 9 things. This could be 2 things for your son or daughter. I want computer time or my swing. And they can then go make a choice. It gives them control, it gives them power, it gives them agency, but it also gives them some downtime. Downtime is huge. And this could be full of their preferred objects or items. This could be watching a video for 15 minutes. This could be riding a bicycle. This could be jumping on a trampoline. This could be drawing. This could be making masks or art pieces, listening to music, anything. I would strongly suggest that we as a group really double down on the sensory aspect of autism. I have seen so many situations where we go in as professionals and we're thinking, okay, why is this challenging behavior happening? Oh, and we start to think in our head, oh, it's because this person over here said this one thing and they don't like math and they really hate to sit in their desk, when really it just boiled down to the fact that they were hot. They were just too warm. And so as soon as we got things like ice water available, a fan, a cool rag, a shirt that makes them feel good, a piece of fabric that calms them, a favorite toy, a string that they can spin, pencils and paper to draw. As soon as those things are introduced, sometimes we see that just having that sensory item available is all they needed to calm down and find regulation. So don't forget in your choice board a lot of those sensory items. The more we say to that person, that son or daughter, hey, it's cool, go use that sensory toy, the more they're going to start to do that themselves when they get dysregulated. Okay. Choice is huge. Here's a tool, next slide please, that we use a lot. And if you haven't heard of this, it's called the Incredible 5-Point Scale. And this came around from a gal, excuse me, in the US, I believe by the name of Carrie Dunn-Burren. And all this does is create a scale and a visual that you can put all kinds of information in to help your son or daughter understand themselves, have self-awareness, and what's going on in the world. Abstract things like emotional regulation. If I tell my friend with autism, you need to regulate your emotions. Okay, what does that mean? It makes things very, very concrete. It increases self-awareness. That's ultimately the goal. We want our children to be as aware of what's going on in their bodies and in the world as possible so they can make their own decisions and their own actions and choices. It gives them confidence and reduces anxiety, of course. And you can adapt this to any individual. For example, what you see on the screen is a 5-point scale for somebody who has some pretty loud vocalizations. So you see a 1 is green, means everything's good. It's no talking. It's time to just listen. 2 is when you can whisper. 3 is when we use what's kind of just a classroom voice or a normal speaking voice. 4 is when we can use that loud outside voice. And a 5, when we're yelling, is reserved for these situations. It helps. I've worked with kids with autism that might go into a public library or a temple or a church, a very quiet place, and just be like, whoa! And these kind of things can really help them understand the social situation and at what level their voice can stay. So if we were going into a temple, I'd probably say, today we're going to try to stay at a 1 or at a 2. And I would bring that visual with me. The next example, the next slide, is how a body feels. And this just uses the 5-point scale to talk about what your body is feeling. So 1 is calm. I'm good. I've got this. Let's keep going. 2 is, okay, I'm feeling great. I might have to ask somebody for some help. 3 is, I'm getting frustrated. 4 is, and 5 is a full-on panic or meltdown. This happens to be around test taking. This could be used at a doctor's office. This could be used in the school for how they're feeling. This could be used at home. How are you feeling right now? It looks to me like you're a 4. What do we need to help you get back down to a 2 or 1? In this slide is a link. And again, Madhvi and our team will work to make sure, since what age can we use the 5-point scale? Any age. I'll tell you this, I've created ones that just use dinosaurs for the 1 through 5, no numbers at all. So any age. Let me give you an example. A really little kid, maybe 2 years old, 3 years old, who's just starting to verbalize and check in with things. We created one that had dinosaurs on it. The one dinosaur was a really kind of friendly looking, slightly pudgy, slow moving dinosaur. And then by the time we got to 5, it was the T-Rex. So that you could use something really understandable and digestible for the student to understand the 5-point scale. We also use this with 50-year-olds who are at work. We tailor it to their needs. It maybe doesn't have all the cartoon colors in it. But the 5-point scale, yes, you bet. The 5-point scale can be used across the lifespan for all of us too. Feel free to use this in your own life if you need it. The link in here is to ocali.org, and what they have are 5-point scale templates. They have probably, I would say 6 on their website that are open templates that you can then put your own information into. So rather than you sitting there thinking, where do I get this? What book do I have to purchase? How long is it going to take to arrive? You can follow this link, and they have some starters right there that you can just download and begin to use or adapt. So that ocali.org, we're going to refer to them a few times. That's in our neighboring state from us here in West Virginia. Lots of great resources. Okay, so we will work to get that out to you. Here's one more example of the 5-point scale. Next slide, please, Dr. Bailey. This kind of incorporates verbal and cartoons into one picture. So if you've got that person who's an emerging reader and also still needs visuals, we've got the visual example right next to the written example. So they're going to be processing written information while they process visual information. If you look at these faces, right, the 1 through 5 on this picture, there's a cartoon that's shown here, and I can't remember if it's shown in India, but it's called Thomas the Tank Engine. So many kids love that, and people love that because the faces on the front of the engine are fixed. And if they change emotion, it's like really dramatic. I think this is a big reason they love some of the Japanese anime and some of the cartoons that are probably available in India. It's all these emotions. Angry Birds, good point, yes. All of these emotions are really broad and fixed, really easy to interpret. So that's part of the reason we incorporate some of those visuals in there as well. So that's just another example. And again, you can pull these right off of that Ocali site and get going. All right. I'm moving to the next slide here. And that is talking about what do we do when we have to leave home. And when we leave home, just because we're leaving doesn't mean that our son or daughter's child's needs for organization go away. What I advocate for is an on-the-go bag, something they can carry. It doesn't have to have sensory inclusive written on the outside. That's kind of a flag that says, my child is different. You don't need to put that on there. If you want to, great. This came up from a zoo that handed these out. When children got to the zoo, they had sensory bags that they could wear, which is a really cool idea. But in that bag, you can have modified schedules, sensory supports, favorite items, favorite things that help them calm down and stay regulated, and they can just wear that. And that way, we can teach them on the go. Check your schedule if you get frustrated or concerned. Put on your headphones if you get overwhelmed. Here's a toy that you can spin or play with if you need to regulate. All of that stuff can come with us. And so we need to remember that we're thinking about supporting our son and daughter and students in a complete environment. So we need to be ready to have that stuff on the go. All kinds of examples out there on Pinterest. All you really have to do is Google ideas for a sensory bag, and you're going to be overwhelmed with things. If you get stuck, please reach out to one of us from this webinar, and we'll be happy to just at least kind of get you pointed in the right direction. Okay, doing a nice job. We're starting to tie it all together, and we've got just a little bit more before we open it up to questions. So at this point, next slide, if we tie this all together, what Dr. Bailey talked about was behavior and understanding our child's needs. And what she was talking about was being able to understand those antecedents or those triggers, what behavior my son or daughter exhibits, and what happened afterwards to maintain that behavior. Meaning, If my daughter last night, which this kind of happened, throws a fit and says, I don't want to brush my teeth, and we fight for a half an hour and she ends up falling asleep, the likelihood that fighting tonight is going to happen so she doesn't have to brush her teeth increases because of the consequence of getting out of that task. So we're understanding our son or daughter. We're getting to know them. What are their triggers? What do they need to calm down? What are the things that really upset them? How do they react? And the next step is then, how do I help them regulate? And Dr. Bailey mentioned things like making sure the body is moving, making sure they have access to fun activities, preferred activities, a lot of those other supports, and then bringing visual clarity to their world. So I understand my kid, I know what they need to regulate, and now I'm going to bring more visual clarity to their world with a schedule, a choice board, 5-point scales, these kind of things. And that combination is really going to help you make some strides at home. For us, it was this reinforcer chart where my daughter gets a sticker every time she stays calm and doesn't get mad. So if she gets all mad and goes, whew, that for me is an instant time where I go put a sticker on your board. That was awesome. So her behavior was anger. Regulation was that she took a deep breath. And the visual clarity was, now go stick a sticker on there, because that is the way to handle those intense emotions. I want to say one more thing before I jump to the next step. There was a question right at the beginning versus what is normal behavior versus what is a challenging behavior. Here's an example where it gets a little murky and we need to just at least be thinking about this. My daughter, who tends to have physical aggression when she gets mad, right? That's hitting, hurting us, pinching, biting sometimes. That's a challenging behavior. It's exhausting for her and it's exhausting for us. However, if a stranger was ever to try to take her or abduct her, I want her to kick, bite, pinch, scratch that person. So what we have to be really careful of is not to say, that's a challenging behavior. You can't do that. Because sometimes challenging behaviors serve a very important function. Speaking up and speaking your mind, especially as a young woman, is incredibly important sometimes. I don't want to teach my son or daughter that you must always obey. You must always follow my rules, because sometimes rule breaking is actually the positive behavior. So just be thinking about this. This isn't a way to just squash our children into perfectly behaving little ones. It's a way to teach them how their body works, how they function in the world, and how they can adapt. Okay, just a few more. Right now on the next slide, we're going to talk a little bit about people locators. And we are working with kids right now that are really frustrated about where their teachers are. Why am I not going back to school? Where is my neighbor? I can't see them anymore because I'm not going out. A people locator is just a visual that helps bring clarity and context to that. It can help them reduce anxiety about where their loved ones or friends are during quarantine, especially. So if you've got sister, where's my sister? She's at swimming class right now, or she went to the market. Where are grandpa and grandma? They're at the farm in Chennai. Oh, why haven't we seen them? Because we're in quarantine, and they'll probably be at the farm in Chennai for another maybe month or two before we get to see them. Where's my teacher? I'm working with a young man right now who feels like he's been abandoned by school. He feels like he's the only one that is not allowed to go to school. We've had to let him know that, no, all of the other students are not allowed either. Your teacher still cares about you. And we had to create a people locator that says, your teacher is at her home too. She can't leave. It just helps organize that confusing social aspect of where are people? Why don't people just stay put? Where are they right now? And this ties to what's called object permanence. And that's a whole other webinar we could do on objects and the meaning of objects to people with autism. But a visual like this that shows where people are, yes, that shows where people are can be extremely calming. So don't forget that aspect too. If they're bringing it up, where's grandma? Where's Ama? Where's Ama? To help them organize that information. People locators, there's samples out on the web. Pinterest has a bunch. Google people locator and you should find some things. These little examples in the slides are pretty decent as well. Okay, we are getting close. So somebody brought up social narratives, and that's the next slide. We have created those specific for the US and West Virginia. You're welcome to take a look at that at the link in this next slide about my school is staying closed. We're at the end of our semester now, so this might not be relevant to your son or daughter or student, but we created some social narratives around why schools are closing and why activities are canceled and how we can fill in some of that missing information. Please, that link brings you to our website, and would love to have you come check us out and see if there's anything that we are providing that is relevant to your situation. So that's a social narrative that's out there if you need it. The next slide is about staying connected. So last I had heard, we had 200 plus or minus people on this call. What an opportunity for us to try to figure out ways to connect as parents and people on the spectrum. There's got to be a way that some of us can start to have, even if it's Zoom or WhatsApp face calls or things like that, where we're meeting up to just connect. And it doesn't have to be long, and it doesn't have to be super successful. It can be really brief. But we're doing things like scavenger hunts as a group. So the picture on the current slide shows a bunch of people in our college program doing virtual scavenger hunts together. It's just a half hour where we stay connected, we stay in each other's lives, we laugh a little bit, and then we go back. You could have virtual play dates where even if it's something as simple as blowing up a few balloons and bouncing them, I mean, these things could be 5 to 10 minutes. They don't have to be all-day events, but just staying connected. And right now, a lot of that is digitally, and that's hard. But I think there's a lot of opportunity. What if we found out on this call right now, there are 5 kids out there who absolutely love air conditioning units? What if we then had a WhatsApp themed call where we just walked around our home and showed our ventilation systems to each other? And then that's it. Just, hey, I'm Ujwal, and this is where I live, and this is my favorite fan. Awesome, Ujwal. That's so cool. Now it's your turn, Pranav. Show them what you like. Think about that. Might seem a little strange, but it's a way for us to stay connected and stay socially engaged and communicating. The next slide. Zoom or yoga or music classes. I think Shalu might be on this call, and Shalu and my friend Nikki, I believe just yesterday or the day before, had a Zoom or Facebook yoga music and movement class and theater and singing. Oh, it makes me so happy. Try to find people in your neighborhoods and networks that are doing this kind of work and just try it. Try to connect in and see how it goes. You might really enjoy, and your child might enjoy, participating in a class like that. And I guarantee you it's happening out there. We just need to find it and network together to find it. The next slide is just about finding a peer for you as a parent and also your son or daughter, just to stay a little bit connected. We had a call a few weeks ago just to talk with some friends and a couple of folks on the spectrum, just to share and connect for a little bit. That's so important. So stay connected. Try to find ways to keep that going. I'm just going to now give you a few resources and ideas, and then I think, Madhvi, we will open it up to questions. So the next slide is resources for things and positive behavior at home. Please check us out. We're at the website marshall.edu/ATC. We have a very active Facebook group, and I would be thrilled if in the next 24 hours, my director calls and says, whoa, what's going on in India? We had a bunch of people join our Facebook group. We would love to have you come find us on Facebook. We're posting things all the time. And the more of our India and Marshall connection we can show, the better. So you're all welcome to join that. We also have a YouTube channel on our website that's full of different teaching webinars and visuals. And we have a Pinterest group as well. So you can hop on there and see the things we've created. The next thing I think every single person needs to check out is ocali.org, and that's the Ohio Center for Autism and Low Incidence. They're a really progressive group doing a lot of good work in the States, and the main thing I want you to check out, besides those 5-point scale templates, is this thing called the Autism Internet Modules.org. They have a bunch of free content. You just have to register with an email, where you can access evidence-based practices on your own time. And they have excellent modules there. I know KidSense and Ananya, we're going to keep doing these things. And what's nice about what we're doing right now is this live chat and talking through things. If you can't, or if you need more information, do go check out autisminternetmodules.org. Free content, evidence-based practices. There are things on behavior, prompting, reinforcement, all of those things that Dr. Bailey talked about. And there are some great courses on visual supports. So if you're after this thinking, I need to make a schedule, but I'm still iffy, I do recommend going and checking out that visual supports module. And the last slide before we wrap up, there's 2 more resources to check out. One is apbs.org, and they have a whole section for families on there, which have some really nice tools, especially for at home right now. And the last thing I'll say, and if Shalu, you're on this call, yay, I miss you. But Evolure, run by Shalu Sharma and her group, they are doing some really cool things with live art lessons and music and all kinds of just really creative expression things. And Shalu, you're doing fantastic work up there. I just wanted to point you all in the direction of Shalu's Facebook page, Evolure Solutions. The link is in these slides. And Shalu, keep up the good work. And folks, if you're looking for something fun and engaging, go check out what Evolure is doing there on Facebook. And I know 100% Ananya is right on that cusp with you all too, doing great work. So with that, I would like to say thank you on behalf of Dr. Bailey and I, and Madhvi and Nirmal. If you want to guide us towards any questions, we'd be happy to answer.
Lots and lots of questions. How much time do we have, Andrew and Catherine, for the question?
I think we have 15 to 20 minutes. Yeah.
We'll see how many we can answer then. The first question, I'm just going in the order of the questions being posted. So, how to deal with the children when they have meltdowns? Who would like to take the question?
Take this one.
Okay.
Essentially, the key is prevention rather than a reactive approach. So when a child has a meltdown, it's all in how you react to it. So if the consequence to the meltdown, if they're trying to access or avoid something, is that the meltdown serves a purpose, then they're more likely to do it again. But from a preventative approach, if you kind of look at their emotional regulation and I know Andrew touched on a lot of addressing sensory issues and things like that, you can prevent the meltdown from occurring. Does it make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah, and I would also say you are the one in control of the situation as the caregiver or teacher. What you have to do is dramatically turn off your verbal expression, because the more verbal you're going to be sending into that situation, the more anxiety raises. So what you have to do, and it's hard, you have to train yourself to go into a neutral state, a supportive state that says, now is not the time to be teaching. I can't be, while they're melting down, saying, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. It is not the time to teach. We have to wait till that meltdown cools back down before we can assess what happened, talk about it, and teach. So one of the things we see a lot of folks do is they increase their verbal input to the person. Mm-hmm. Do you need your sensory item? Do you need this? Can you calm down? Do you need to sit down? You shouldn't be doing that. And all that does is just go. So you have to hunker down. You have to keep them safe, others around them safe, wait out the storm, because a lot of teaching and coaching can happen afterwards, but not during. That doesn't mean you don't provide sensory items and supports to help them calm down, but I would just limit the teaching in those moments. Yeah. That's all I would say.
Exactly. And rather than feeding into the chaos, you want to share your calmness. Mm-hmm. Even though it's hard sometimes, and as a parent, we're all humans, so you might need to take a time out yourself to step away for a minute and count to 10 and then come back and be that source of calmness for your child.
I think the child, when they're upset, I have a 21-year-old son with autism, and he's verbal, and still when he's upset, I think all he wants is us to listen. He's not even looking for a solution. He just wants us to know that he's upset. And as long as we acknowledge that, he calms down, So it's I think we learn by experience, and I think if we live with a person with autism, I think by observing them and getting the cues that they're not able to say verbally, I think that's important, I think, for parents. So the next question is, I think you've already answered it, but anyway, I'm going to read it. What is the difference between difficult behaviors and normal behavior? And what do we do when normal behavior becomes difficult? Yeah.
Want me to start this one, Dr. Bailey? Okay. So normal behavior versus difficult behavior. For many, many decades, we have taught society that this is not good behavior, that this is a challenge. We've done like hands down and things like that. So we have to be very careful with our friends with autism that we don't use broad society to normalize or denormalize behavior. This, for my friend with autism, is as important to them as watching a favorite show or eating a favorite food or drinking my morning coffee is to me. This is regulation to them. This is very important and very normal for them. So it varies by person. And normal behavior, we have to be so careful because we also look at things that people with autism do, like focus in on one topic. They focus in just on fans or air conditioning systems, or they focus in just on Bollywood stars. But the thing is, we do that too. How many of you are absolutely focused and overwhelmed by politics? How many of you are so into a cricket team that you have their jersey, the pennant, the hat, the pictures, all of those things? So what we have to be very careful of is not looking at a person with autism and saying, oh, that's not normal, we need to fix that. First, we have to reflect and say, why do I think that that's not normal? Is it my own bias? Challenging behaviors are, for me, any behavior that is not very effective for that person. Meaning, now a tantrum might be very effective for them to get their way, but it's draining their energy. It's draining their parents' energy. They have to spend 45 minutes to get what they want. It's not effective and efficient. So to me, a challenging behavior is something that could be made more effective and efficient with learning practice. Rather than throwing yourself on the floor and hitting your head to say, I want SpongeBob, a picture card that says, I want SpongeBob, that you hand to my hand is so much easier. It's so much more effective. So for me, it's challenging behavior is behavior that is not the most effective way to get that need or want met for that person.
And also, the first thing that occurs to someone with autism probably is not the card that you've given them to use. Sometimes they forget that there's a card that they can use to communicate. So you might have to keep the cards available or prompt them. Show me, what do you want? What's upsetting you? What is it that's bothering you? Because that's not the first thought that comes to them, isn't it, Andrew? I see that a lot happening in my son, you know.
Yes. And the other thing we do is we try to teach those card things only when there's a need and like intensity, rather than teaching them to use the card when they're calm, when the environment is low demanding. Yeah. That's when we really need to be teaching them how to use it, when they're relaxed, when the environment is not chaotic. Yeah.
So the next, Catherine, do you want to add something to this? Yeah.
No, I think Dr. Nelson impeccably answered that. I have nothing to add. That was perfect.
Okay, thank you. The question is, I have a 5-year-old son on the spectrum. Please advise me on how to help him cope with and introduce him to online learning.
With online learning, I think that even as adults, we experience something called Zoom fatigue. And this is actually, the American Psychological Association, for example, has even published articles that this is a real thing, because it takes a lot of energy to, for example, decipher different facial expressions and the nuances in communication via Zoom. And sometimes we don't get the same, positivity from Zoom interaction. So I would say, to the greatest extent that you're able to do so with online learning, is keep it positive, maybe incorporate a first then. So, first you Zoom with your class, then we go outside and play or ride bikes. But also too, for example, I've done this with my own kids who are 5 and 7. Sometimes they just don't want to Zoom. The sun is shining, they want to go out and play, and I don't force them to do so. And that keeps it more positive. So on the days when, they really do need to engage in the lesson, they're more likely to do so. So kind of be mindful of that your child is a human with needs and preferences as well. And sometimes they just aren't feeling it or having a bad day, and that's okay. And so don't put that pressure on yourself to make sure that they're engaged in every lesson.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, the child is just a 9-year-old,
Yes.
So I don't think it's so important to be part of every Zoom lesson that happens every single day. It's okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Andrew, can you add something to this?
I was just going to say the first then is a great opportunity, especially if it's just that they don't like the online lesson, but they still like to be online. So what you can do is just, even if it's a minute, you check into this Zoom meeting for 1 minute, you get to then go over to your preferred game where you click and jump and grab coins and whatever that part is. If they don't like the computer at all, I would say even if they just sit down while the Zoom meeting is going, all they have to do is come to the chair, sit down, and just maybe look at it or touch the screen, and then they can go back. And what you can do from there is build the duration of how long they sit. So the next step is you sit and you click, or you sit and you type your name in. You sit and you answer one question, and then you start to slowly build that in. But you have to reinforce that. It can't just be sit longer. It has to be reinforced with things that they like. And that's where a first then card is beautiful for that.
Okay. Thank you, Andrew. The next question is, doing brain gym exercises, are they helpful in improving behavior of the child?
I would say absolutely. Really, any type of engagement that has physical activity and engaging their mindfulness and things like that can really help to improve their behavior. And if you think about even as adults, when we have activities where we're physically engaged and whatnot, it helps to improve our mood. So it helps to improve your child's mood as well. Yeah, that's a great question.
Can I throw in a little bit of Indian pride on this one? There's this thing that came out a decade ago called super brain yoga, I think, but it was like all these people got hip to what India's been doing for 5,000 years, with the things like this. So
yeah,
go back to your heritage on that stuff, all of those activities, while Westerners try to co-opt that and make some money off of it. Forget all that programming. Do what you all know instinctively as a culture there. Yes, go back to your roots and all of that stuff, all of the I know that some of the mudras and things like that, but that's not the right word. But all of those activities that are built right into your culture, man, that's where the richness is. So don't feel like you have to subscribe to some online profile. Go to your local temple or find a neighbor and do that together.
Thank you, Andrew. How do we tackle the anxiety bouts, the bouts of anxiety that kids have?
Well, first, I need to know why. So before I can answer how, I need to know why and what. And that's where I think Catherine's section on understanding behavior. So if there's anxiety, first thing I need to know is why and what. Does it only happen midday? Is it only when the sun's really bright? Is it when traffic is at its peak? Is it when they're hungry? Is it when they're told no? Is it based on weather? Like, the very first thing before you can really address the anxiety is to know the root, the core of it. So you have to become an investigator first to say, what are the patterns here? And then that gives you feedback and ideas on what to do about it and how to handle that anxiety. So if it's midday when the honking auto rickshaws are at their highest and they're hungry, we know about 10:30 a.m. we're probably going to start to introduce some headphones and start to cook some things and have those ready or have choice cards available. So I could answer blanket, say we'll do this, but ultimately what you need to know first is the why and the what. And then you know how to address it. So you have to become really good investigators. You have to become good at understanding what the triggers are.
I think also having a little notebook where you write down if these kind of bouts are happening over and over again, and having this ABC checklist where you keep noting, and then I think in a couple of 1 or 2 weeks or days, a couple of days, you'll start seeing a pattern. Every time the child is doing something, there is a trigger that's happening, and you change the trigger, not the behavior. If the trigger's gone, the behavior disappears on its own. So yeah, been there, done that.
Yes, and then when you identify the trigger, if it's something that's not sensory related, for example, if it's related to, say, for example, the stay-at-home orders, things like that, you can either obtain a social story or write your own and use that as kind of an explanation in concrete terms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Catherine. Shalu's question, Andrew. As an educator, one challenge I face is that sometimes the student is just not ready to attend an online class. I can see that the parent is struggling to manage the anxiety. At most times, I'm willing to wait for the child to take time, wherein the parent does the needful and brings the child back to the screen. If there is a real struggle, I postpone the class to another time or day. But with back-to-back classes, it becomes difficult to reschedule all the time. So how much to push the child? How do we schedule? How do we manage our schedules with all this happening?
It's a great question, Shalu. And the harder we push, the harder we demand and push, the less likely it is that it's going to be successful. So it's a tricky position. What I would say is back way up. And for the actual online section of it, go to the basics. Can they just sit and attend to the screen for a short amount of time and then be done for the day? But then what I think you need to do is have the parent collect permanent product, we call, which could just be a picture of something they've drawn. It could be 2 spoons hitting a bucket like we did at the art festival, and they capture a picture of that, or they capture some permanent product that then could maybe be tied together. But I would say back off on the online. The harder we push, the less likely it is that it's going to be successful. But you still, as an educator, need feedback that things are happening. So I would shift more to a parent training model at that point that says, okay, we're not sitting in this chair very well, and I get that. And you can keep bringing the child over, but they're going to start to hate me and the computer pretty quickly. So let's train you how to capture some of those moments that will give me information as their teacher about how they're doing and what I can coach you on. I would shift more to a parent training model and then back way off on the expectations and start to build on the smallest little steps. That's my recommendation.
Yeah. Thanks. Catherine, would you like to add something?
Again, I think Dr. Nelson impeccably answered that.
So next question is, how to control the behavior of asking food even though the kid has just finished his lunch and they keep on asking for more and more snacks?
I'll answer that one. I think that particularly with everything going on right now, sometimes it can be a function of boredom. So wanting to access food because the child is bored. Sometimes it also can be a function of comfort. Even us as adults right now are seeking comfort food. Sometimes we're eating out of boredom and whatnot, and our children are no different in that way. So getting back to identifying the function of why they're asking for food, with those two, boredom and wanting that comfort, being really the top two for a lot of us right now, including kids, and then kind of responding from there. So if it is a function of boredom, maybe saying, okay, well, let's go outside and play for a little bit. And then if you're still hungry, we can come in. Another option too, and again, I do this with my own kids because I'm struggling with the same thing right now where I'm hungry, I want a snack, is offering healthy, low-calorie options. So for example, an apple versus Oreo cookies, or even popsicles, things like that are more healthier options with them.
And there's another, yes, awesome. And there's another aspect to think about too, is what's called interoception. So this is kind of a newer hip thing we're learning from autistic people themselves, is that there's this 8th sense. So we know the 5 senses, plus we know about the vestibular, which is that inner ear and maybe why you see spinning. And we know about proprioception, which is that gravity and where we are in space. There's a new one that we're learning much more about called interoception. And that is a person's ability to receive signals from the body that gives them information about how their body is feeling. So we have a lot of kids with autism that don't know that they're about to have a bowel movement or that they have to use the restroom because their body's not giving them the signals, or they don't know how to interpret those signals. What you might be experiencing, in addition to boredom for sure, and habit and ritual and those kind of things, is an actual body that is not giving signals of full. So that son or daughter might not be understanding that their tummy is absolutely full with snacks. And I think maybe this is a chance to use a 5-point scale. 1 being, I'm full, I've had a bunch of food. And a 5 is like, oh, I'm starving, I've eaten nothing for the last 6 to 10 hours. And you might be able to make something like that visuals to start to teach body sensation and what that means about behavior. It's one idea.
Thank you, Andrew. The next question is, what opportunities for expression can we give to low-functioning children? What opportunities of expression can we give to low-functioning children? That was my alarm for 7:30, so can we take like a couple of more questions? There are loads of them. Maybe 2 or 3 more? Yeah, okay. Yeah.
In terms of opportunities for expression, you can definitely use PECS, like picture exchange communication systems. It doesn't have to be PECS, the brand name. It can be any form of visual. You can use augmentative communication devices such as the iPad, but also too, and even kids who have limited verbal ability can still benefit from expression with artwork. So drawing, painting, things like that, music, etc.
Okay.
One thing I do want to add to that is also presume competence. And what I mean is, just because your child doesn't have verbal expression does not mean that they do not have receptive understanding. Meaning, we have so many kids that we talk around, and just because they can't verbally express, we assume that they cannot have no cognition either, which is so wrong. So don't confuse yourself by thinking, oh, they can't tell me what's going on, therefore I can just talk about them. And they're not processing any of this. They're in fact processing all of it. And I think you need to remind yourself, we all do, to presume the competence just because they can't verbally express. And we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out how to get them a channel to express. They are processing all of our information, and we need to be mindful of that.
Exactly. Just because the child can't articulate to you what they're picking up on doesn't mean that they're not soaking that in. Yeah.
So what is the next one is, some strategies to handle a child who demands a lot of attention. I think Catherine already answered it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll go on to the next one. We'll be sending the recording anyway, so they can always listen to the presentation again. So can you provide some options on the mobile phone? I can email you, Ramu, Deepthi. The visual schedules, I have so many. I can share them with you, no problem. So what is the full form of KCVIP? Was it in the presentation? I don't know. What is this about? Is it some kind of abbreviation? I don't know. We'll get back to you about that. The last question, how do you handle sudden impulsive behavior? Sometimes there is no reason. The child is working for 10 minutes, fine, and sudden impulsive behavior comes up.
First question I'm going to ask is, what's going on with the body? Has there been a noise? And it could be a noise that we don't even perceive. Yeah. It could be a sensory piece of stimuli that we don't even know exists. I have a friend that can, when he pulls into his driveway outside of his home, he knows if his son is on electronics because he can hear the humming in his ear from the car. So first thing, when something goes from just working to explosive, the first thing I think of is something happened to the body. It was either a sound, a smell, an ear thing. The next question I would ask myself as I'm observing that, is it a frustration with task? So was there something that they were doing that triggered that? Did they get upset because they made a mistake? Was there something in the task that triggered it? 9 times out of 10, in my experience, it's going to be something in those cases where we're like, what is happening? It's something that's happening in or to the body is where I start first.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I think there's so many questions. I'll try and get the answers to these questions maybe offline and email them to you, or if you can connect with us on the email ID that I gave, we'll try and answer as many questions as possible. I think it's time to end the webinar, even though I don't want to end it.
We'll come back anytime, right? Right, Catherine?
Yeah.
We'll come back anytime.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Thank you so much, Catherine. It was lovely. Learned
Thank
so
you. Wow.
as always. Thank you. Thank you so
Absolutely.
much.
Feel free to email us.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, participants. It has been a great having you guys all here. It's been an opportunity for all us to connect in this time of COVID. Andrew and Catherine, you both were fabulous. And we look forward to more webinars from you all.
Yes, us too. And we look to the time when we can fly over and come see you too. So.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.